Hello everyone, this is 2024 International Relations paper discussion. Like we have done for ethics, here also our major focus is to get more clarity on how to prepare international relations, how to exactly approach this paper from a student perspective. So evolving this strategy and taking away key learnings for 2025, this will be the key approach of these sessions, not just to simply deliver you particular content related to say, any questions that is asked in 2024. Now international relations, yes, you might be well aware, we get 4 questions for 50 marks, 2 10 markers and 2 15 markers. Now this is the construct. Now what kind of questions is being asked? Each and every question in last 5-6 years has been taken from recent developments. Some new organization has been formed. We have seen question from I2U2. We have seen question from Quad. Some international organizations, India, ASEAN, India, SCO, India, regional relations, West Asia, Middle East, Europe, and India's relation with West, with China, with regional neighbors like Sri Lanka. We had a question when Sri Lanka was going through economic crisis. And there has been some questions on international organizations like IMO was last year. This year we have this counter-terrorism committee. So UN organizations mostly are a little bit more important. And we have seen some of the questions on from themes like environment as a theme, counter-terrorism as a theme. So what is its geopolitical dimensions? On these also questions being asked. This is the whole construct of from where questions are coming in international relations. Now how to prepare this subject? There are sometimes certain like big roadblocks in preparation to this subject. I have gone through a lot of books that is available in the market. Most of the books over speaks about evolution of India's foreign policy. It speaks in detail about Nehruvian policy, how it changed during the times of Indira Gandhi, how it changed during the times of say Jawaharlal Nehru, how it was during this coalition period, and how it is Modi government is giving a new direction to India's diplomacy. So these all are important, or lot of information is related to theoretical background of India's foreign policy. All these things are not irrelevant. These are very interesting to read. But from an exam point of view, overreading this aspect is waste of time because you are not going to get a direct question from this. These are just filler elements. You just need to have a broad picture. Even if you read a brief summary of Indian foreign policy of 5 pages or 10 pages, that is going to suffice your understanding. Rest, it is this preparation of international relations should be majorly done from newspapers, from recent developments, from current affairs. So this should be your approach. Even if you are taking any book, don't focus too much on theoretical basis or historical aspects of international relations. Focus more on what is in the newspaper, what is more relevant from India's perspective. This is where questions being asked. This is where what you have to write in the paper. Rest of the things are filler elements or supporting arguments, nothing more beyond that. Now, how to prepare? There is also a structured approach we have evolved in preparation of international relations. Preparation of international relations should also go with exactly how you generate points for international relations. For almost every question, we have also applied this approach to almost every PYQs. So every question you can generate points. This is framework to generate points. Think on these lines, 3 lines. That is shared values, national interest, and strategic. For example, we are going to generate point for India-US relations. Why India and US are coming together in the present context. What are the shared values between India and US? We have a common history, or you can say common colonial history. We are part of both democracies. One is the largest democracy, where US is one of the oldest democracies. We both emphasize on rights of people. Similarly, what is national interest? Mostly what is economic interest between India and USA? India is one of the largest exporter. India's largest exporting trade happening. Second largest trading company is US. We have huge amount of supply chain linkages. A huge amount of India's investments come from US. You might even know this, how the recent changes in repo rate of US Federal Bank is how it is affecting global inflows of FPIs, FIIs and all. So with globalization, with privatization, the integration of economies is increasing and increasing. When we speak about integration, two economics that is coming too close, that is India and US. Similarly, we have all the global trade that is expanding through dollar. Environment is another national interest priority. How is India and US having similar goals like net zero targets? Even on we have understanding on net zero emissions and pathways for net zero emissions. Similarly, what is strategic? China is the biggest factor, strategic factor that is bringing India and US close. What are other strategic factors? Indo-Pacific. Even in West Asia, India has a role to play. We have recently launched this I2U2, a lot of other post-Abraham Accords. A lot of institutions are being set up in the Middle East with India and US as partners. So this is the whole UN reforms you can think of. This, whatever I have given you, this is a framework how you should generate point. At least if these three things come to your mind in generating point towards any question, it can be India's relation with US, troubles in India's relation with US, you can generate points on value problems, on national interest problems and strategic problems. Whether it is institutional questions, this framework is integral to international relations. Almost 8 out of 10 questions you can directly apply this framework and generate points. And why this such a framework is important? Because it becomes sometimes overwhelming to generate points. If you have a framework, if you have a structured way of thinking, first I will think about values, then I'm thinking about national interest, then I'm thinking about strategic interest. Even if I'm just generating 2 points out of these, I will get 6 points, and that is always enough. As we have seen in ethics, what our focus is, in every question we will mostly divide question into at least 2 heads, and that means if 2 heads are there, 5 points, that will suffice. So this is the basic requirement. So here also this is the basic requirement, like divide the points question, demand of the question into 2 different headings and give 5 points. And for the generating that 5 points, you have this framework. And what to think under each of these categories, you have a detailed overview here. You can think about common history like colonial history we have discussed for US. You can think about political values like democracy, like secularism. Panchsheel is a value principle of India's foreign policy, which include respect for territorial integrity, non-aggression, non-interference in internal matters, equality and cooperation, peaceful coexistence. Recent political visits, Prime Minister has visited the country, you can always use that in your value perspective. National interest economy is the major thing. In economy, what all to think? Imports, exports. You need to learn some data for this. Connectivity, investment, energy, financial, inclusion, diaspora, all this can be included. Social, education skills, healthcare, digitech, other tech, etc. Technology, digitech, emerging tech, space, cooperation, space diplomacy. Security aspects also you can include. Environmental aspects you can include. In strategic, neighborhood first, Gujarat Doctrine, countering China, no terrorism, no zero tolerance policy to terrorism, rule of law, non-alignment, multipolar global order, UN reforms, other organizations, regional organizations, which are becoming more and more relevant in today's context. So these are different dimensions you can think under each heads. It is not that you should get the points for all these different dimensions in an answer. You use whichever is relevant. Whichever is the most relevant, use that points. But if you have a structured thinking process, that makes generating points much easier. Now coming back to preparation, how you should do the preparation. For example, like take India's relation with all major countries, like India US, India Russia, India China. These are 3 major countries. Then take regions, India Southeast Asia, India Middle East, India and neighborhood, India and Europe, India and USA, or you can say American countries. So Africa, very important. So these regional countries you have to prepare. Beyond that, you have to prepare whichever organizations in use. Now, when you are making notes, make notes in this fashion so that you can revise it faster, so that you can recollect it faster, so that you can have this structured thinking process in your preparation, in your notes, that can be readily replicated in your answer writing. So, one of the best optimum way to prepare international relations, that is, make these notes for different regions, different countries, then make for major UN institutions similar notes. These two notes are the only thing you need for international relations. Then you can even refer some compilations which has been released by XYZ magazines on recent developments that is happening last 1 year. So that compilation will suffice you to cover international relations. So this is the whole construct of how you should prepare, how you should approach international relations. And on that note, we will go to 2024 question discussions. This is the first question. Go through the question, then we will continue the discussion. Sorry. Yeah, what is the question? The West is fostering India, an alternative to reduce dependence on China's supply chain as a strategic ally to counter US China's political and economic dominance. Explain this statement with examples. Whenever I am reading the statement, what should I should come to my mind, what is the demand of the question? What is the demand here? Explain is the term. So I don't need to do an analysis. I don't need to give an advantages or disadvantages on this thing. I am not going to discuss. I'm only going to explain what is the idea given here. Now, what is the easiest way? That is to split the idea of the statement that is given. How you can split it? West is fostering India as an alternative to reduce dependence on China's supply chain. So China's supply chain dependence reduction. This is first part of the statement that is given. What is another two parts that is given? It's a strategic ally. India as a strategic ally. Now, what is the purpose of this strategic ally? That is to counter economic dominance and political dominance. So I got one part here, I got second part here, and I got a third part here. Three parts I can divide this statement into. This is the idea of the statement. Now I need to explain these ideas. That is how India is able to counter the supply chain dominance of China. Can I give at least 3 points for this? On a minimum basis, minimum 3 points for this. How India can be economically counter the dominance of China. 3 points. How it is politically West is seeing India as to counter China. You can give 3 points. 3 points is minimum, I'm saying. Now an intro. What are the two things I will look into intro? Whether it is relevant. You can give a data, you can give a context, you can interpret the quotation, idea of the quotation. These are the idea of the XYZ statement given. All this you can do. Best is if you can relate it with some current developments, if you can relate it with statement by the Prime Minister. All these are perfect introduction. But what I'm looking for is you should only write 2 to 3 lines. Don't overwrite. That is the first thing. Second thing, it should be relevant to the question. Even if you are writing very simple introduction, it is absolutely fine, but it should be fairly relevant. Don't dump something you have prepared and come to the exam hall. Even if it is not relevant, if you see India, China, you just dump it. No, don't do that. Write something relevant. Write only 2 to 3 lines. These, without crossing these limits, you can innovate or improvise. Same goes for conclusion also. Not write anything more than 2 to 3 lines. Then within this you can improvise, you can give statement of Prime Minister, you can give Indian foreign policy doctrines, you can give futuristic vision. All these are feasible. Multipolar world or vision of India, this can be very commonly used conclusions. Rest all of our answers should be on these three aspects. So by doing this splitting exercise, don't make any mistakes. If you are able to do this exercise correctly, then half of your work is done. Then your base knowledge is going to support you. Otherwise, you cannot approach, not just for international relations, for say any subject, by simply from a knowledge perspective. I'm going to remember everything and right now you are not going to remember. You need to build that system to understand and interpret questions correctly, and with a minimum knowledge give a decent answer. How you can do that? Question, even if a challenging question comes, do not make a mistakes in splitting different dimensions of the question. This should be your primary objective. So introduction, pivot towards India, response to China's growing global influence and economic dominance, alternate manufacturing hub, as a geopolitical ally. This is all emerging concepts, emerging closeness between India and the West. You can write about China's different policies, China's phase of flexing muscles, which we like in general talks about China, what China is going through. China is going through a phase of flexing muscles. Earlier, till 2010, it was a time of building the muscles or building phase. In building phase, it was trying to build cordial relation with the West. Now in flexing muscles, it is slightly starting to dominate. It is starting to challenge the West. This is giving a lot of troubles for US, say in South China Sea, say in borders along India, say in lot of other, in Taiwan Strait, what happened to Hong Kong. So in all these areas, what we are seeing is one thing, that is flexing of muscles. Again, like if you look at the broader context of what is happening between West and China, in the micro scale, what we are seeing is some political statements, heated political statements. Sometimes we see these kind of trade war kind of measures, which is increasing taxes on both sides. But beyond that, what is a global picture for this conflict? We had a conflict of communism versus capitalism. This was between USSR and the West. In West means dominated by China, I'm sorry, US. Now this phase from Second World War, it continued till 1990, till the collapse of USSR. Now with the collapse of USSR, this economic battle between capitalism and say communism has lost its steam. Today the world is moving into another phases. Even China, when we look at what ideology China is exporting or what ideology China is supporting, it's not simply based on communism. It is not simply speaking about communism. China even has incorporated many elements of capitalism. It's an export-led development economy. So the world is moving towards civilizational struggles. Even Chinese Communist Party, they are reviving the Chinese civilization, nationalizing Chinese political thought. So what we are seeing in future context is this clash of civilizations, where we can see this Chinese civilization coming in close with Russian communist, you can say outward of USSR, and it is coming close with Arabic civilization in the West. And this Arabic civilization is in direct conflict is what we see between Israel and Palestine. And India, being a cosmopolitan civilization, is in midst of all of this. Whatever is going to happen in any part of the world is impacting us directly or indirectly. This is like the broad picture of what is happening between China and what is happening between China and US in specific. So this is not going to end, like there is no particular solution for this. What is the short-term solution India is looking at? India is looking at counterbalancing Chinese acts, and how they are going to counterbalance by bringing together like these like-minded countries. In Quad, we can see the diamond democracies, India, USA, Australia, Japan coming together. We have other initiatives like IPA, where ASEAN countries and some other developed countries are coming together. We have different I2U2, IMEC, different kind of initiatives that is going on. But the whole construct is to building counterbalancing China with an arc of similar minded countries. Now, on the other hand, the construct, what the West is seeing, West is here for their vested interest. West doesn't want to leave the dominance of these regions simply into the hands of China. Wherever you have seen a withdrawal of West, China has aggressively pursued there. You see the case of Iran. Iran has been isolated by West, but why it's not falling? Because China is supporting it. Even you can see this in the context of Russia. Russia has been undergoing in a period of war since 2000, say since the Ukraine war, 2022 Ukraine war has started. But since this Ukraine war has started, if you look at the US economy, it is not able, it is not falling in great numbers. Why it is not falling? Why it is holding on? Despite the sanctions by the West, despite putting on a lot of business barriers by the West, despite the war continuing, not in particular the interest of Russia, why it's still, how it's still able to build the momentum, how it's still able to hold its end. Because we, on the other hand, have China in support of Russia, and this having Chinese economy in support of Russia, that's a great market for Russian products, that's a great resource hub for Russian products. On the other hand, India is also keeping its close ties with Russia. India has more than 200 times increased its oil imports from Russia. So this has greatly supported the Russian economy. These dynamics are all underplaying. These are the things you should have clarity on. It is on the basis of this clarity you can write this answer. India has China's supply chain dominance. So supply chain related, what is it? Supply chain related, this context of supply chain. This came into prominence during the time of COVID-19. COVID-19, even though the pandemic and all this pandemic was going on, it was also a period of, you can say, China's militarization of its dominance over supply chain. Many of these easily understandable aspect is the critical minerals. Many of these critical minerals, if you look at this, China has 95% of the global trade, global exports. So China has absolute dominance in critical minerals. And what China do is, it can cripple economies in other countries. In 2010s, we have seen, just in 2008, just after the global financial meltdown, what China did is it completely blocked this supply of critical minerals to Japan. Japan was a country which is having huge amount of electronics industry. We have different companies from Japan. This whole industry has struggled because of this, and it took a lot of years for the industry to build other supply chains, to negotiate and to build back into the previous status. So China during COVID time, what happens? It happened with Australia. You might have learned about India and Australia signing EFTA and moving towards a free trade agreement. Why India and Australia is coming together? It is on this context. AUKUS was also signed. AUKUS was about nuclear submarines have been supplied from US to Australia. Why this happened? It all happened due to one thing, because Australia was on the brunt of China's militarization of supply chain during COVID times. COVID times, when Trump was the president of US, he was on the forefront in attacking China for alleging that China has built this COVID virus in the laboratory. Now, Australia was a country who supported this. Australia was a country who strongly demanded this independent investigation into origins of COVID. Now, how China responded? China responded in an emphatic way. Emphatic means it put barriers, it put phytosanitary measures, it put different trade barriers for import of dairy products from Australia to China. So this has, already due to COVID times, the market is extremely vulnerable, and this has added pains to Australia. This is the whole context. This is when Australia started, we should build our defenses, which lead to AUKUS, which is when Australia started, we should diversify our economic engagement with the world, and which led to EFTA between India and Australia. The broad context is militarization of its supply chain during COVID times by China. Now, this is a threat, not just a threat for USA. Even Indian manufacturing base is based on imports from China. Indian solar industry, 90% of Indian solar industry is coming from China. We have underlying interdependence on a lot of our industries on China. Critical minerals, obviously. So not just us, we are also moving towards diversifying our supply chain dominance. Classic example is supply chain resilience initiative. Similarly, PLI scheme. Before PLI scheme, we had this. You might have remember the case India, US has charged against India in Jawaharlal Nehru solar mission case. This was particular subsidies was provided. There was some local supply points, local supply demands under this particular mission, and all this was contested in WTO, and India eventually lost that case. But when it comes to PLI, it is a very similar case. It is a very similar scheme which also provides certain subsidies for some certain industries. It is just like an old wine in a new bottle, but still this PLI scheme is not being contested at WTO. Why it is not contested? Because there is now more cooperation, coordination between India and the Western partners. Similarly, manufacturing relocation. We have seen a lot of companies leaving China. Even Apple has started manufacturing in India. A lot of other electronics and other companies are using India as the base, Vietnam as the base, Taiwan as the base. So people, countries or companies are relocating themselves out of China. Electronic sector growth. You might have seen India's recent targets. By 2030, we are trying to build 500 billion semiconductor base. So this is a emerging industry, semiconductor industry development, 2 million training for semiconductor assembly, testing, all these kind of things. So these are all different initiatives which speaks of India relocating, or this can say supply chain resilience. That is, companies are reducing their dependence of supply chain on China. Similarly, political question you can write about Quad, you can write about India as the major defense partner of US, India-US Defense Cooperation Act, Maritime Security Cooperation, that is majorly India, US interest lies in Indo-Pacific. Diplomatic support, territorial integrity question, UN reforms also you can add into this, countering China's economic dominance, critical technology. IPEF is very much in line with this idea we are discussing. IPES is a completely different organization. How it is different? It is different because it was a pullback of US from the ideas of globalization. What are the ideas of globalization? Globalization speaks about reallocating resources in the most optimum way, that is least cost production. Where it is, you allocate resources to that country. The most efficient way of production happens. So this is the basic principle of investment in a globalized world. And USA since Second World War has supported the idea. Where in IPF it is speaking about friendshoring. Friendshoring. What is friendshoring? Friendshoring is a counter idea to globalization. That is shifting supply chains to those countries who are friends with ourselves. Where resilience is also important. Where the undue political action, irrational political action will not happen. So these things are important in friendshoring. This is what you have to consider. Infrastructure development, we have seen IMEC, we have seen a lot of other organizations basically to counter China's Belt and Road Initiative. Now, what is the construct of Belt and Road Initiative? We speak about China as export-led country. What it's exporting? Earlier it was exporting low cheap end products. Then it shifted to high-end products like iPhones, like high-end mobiles, other technologies. Now it is going into infrastructure export of infrastructure. Foreign direct investment, trade agreements that is going on. All these are different examples of India's countering to China has economic dominance. Conclusion, you can write about balancing strategic autonomy. So whenever India is going in close with West, it is also very much close with Russia. It is also very much close with other countries in the region. So India should always uphold its principle of strategic autonomy, which is uncompromisable from Indian's perspective. And you can write about India's multipolar global order vision. You can write about enhancing India's global stature, etc., etc. Go through the next question, then we will have the discussion. Now, what's it about? Central Asian republics, very straightforward question. Critically analyze, again reading the questions means understanding the demand of the question. Here it is starting with critically analyze. Okay? Critically analyze India's evolving diplomatic, economic and strategic relation with Central Asian republics, highlighting their increasing significance in the region and global geopolitics. Okay? What we can write for intro? You can write about India-Central Asian relations, Central Asian republics relations. If you have remember the data, if you remember the value system, if you remember some of the visits, you can all use that in introduction. In body, we have critically analyze here, so we have to analyze. Even you can write about diplomatic, economic and strategic some examples and write the introduction. In body, I'm going to give like benefits of Central Asian republics, or you can say limitations or limitations of India Central Asian relations. These two aspects you can write. Give 5 points here, give 5 points here, your work is done. Then if you want, you can add a way forward, but this is not the demand of the question. So what we'll do, we'll try to put this in a diagrammatic format or make this a conclusion. Then you can write about conclusion. Again, the whole things we have discussed in the first part, you can include it here also. So what has been written in introduction, we have written about India's extended neighborhood concept. You can use this for ASEAN also. You can use this for Japan, Indo-Pacific, West Asia. All these countries you can connect with the concept of extended neighborhood. Aims of engagement, energy enhance regional influence, energy security, economic opportunities, countering other powers in the region. These all are our important aspects related to this. India's evolving relationship with Central Asian republics. This is a part of introduction. This write in very short. You don't need to overwrite it. If you can show this in a diagram, that is very much best. Why we are doing this? Because this is not the exact demand of the particular question. This is kind of a substantiating the whatever argument is given in the question. For substantiating, this question is not about explain, elaborate or something. This is about critically analyze. So your majority of your answer should be related to benefits and counter benefits, advantages, all these kind of things. Advantages of strengthening ties, what is it? Geopolitical advantages, energy diversification, collaboration, security initiatives, economic opportunities. Here you can apply our concept. What are the values? What are the national interest? What are the strategic interests? You can think on these lines and write 5 points for this. Similarly, for limitations, you can write about no direct access. We were thinking about like going like bypassing Pakistan but through Iran. We have this Chahabar port project, but all these are continuously being delayed because of India's the continued sanctions on Iran by the West, and which is blocking India's connections with Iran. You can write about competition between other powers. BRI is investing heavily in the region. Structural challenges like Chahabar port, political issues, instabilities in the region, terrorism in the region. All these are challenges to this. SCO we have seen there is a summit. You can use that also in particular question. Conclusion, way forward, if you want to add, you can write, otherwise you can go for conclusion. This way forward based conclusion which speak about prioritize military, multilateral engagements, enhance economic diplomacy, infrastructure connectivity, leverage soft power, and proactive foreign policy. These are different aspects you can write in the conclusion. Again, you can put this in a diagram and go for another 2-line conclusion. That is also optimum. That is also very much appreciated for this particular question. Go to the 19th question, then we will continue the discussion. Yeah, what it is about? Terrorism has become significant threat to global peace and security. We have a statement. Evaluate is the keyword here. So you need to give a pros and cons analysis. Evaluate the effectiveness of United Nations Security Council, Counter-Terrorism Committee (CTC) and its associated bodies in addressing and mitigating this threat as an international level. Again, there are a few things you need to keep in mind while answering this. Evaluate is the keyword. So you have to do an analysis. You have to give the good things about this particular committee, bad things about limitations of this particular committee. Now, many of you might not have heard about CTC, but a lot of editorials are on ineffectiveness of UNSC in Russia-Ukraine war, in Israel-Palestine war, in countering terrorism or this kind of activities at global level. So a lot of things we already know about the limitations of global institutions. Use that to your advantage. Forget about CTC for a time being. Write about UN organization is failing the global terrorism developments. Write about that 5 points, negatives about it 5 points. That will suffice for this particular question. So introduction. You can write a little bit extended introduction by substantiating the statement. Terrorism has become a significant threat to global peace and security. How is terrorism a threat to peace and security? If there is certain data, facts, you can use that in your answer in introduction. You can give some arguments also, 2-3 arguments, that is also obviously fine. So this will be a perfect introduction for this. For body, what you are going to do? For body, you are going to 2 parts. You are divided it into 2 parts. Like you can say success of UNSC CTC, or so you can say misses or limitations of UNSC CTC. 5 points here, 5 points here, that will suffice our answer. Then if you want to give a way forward, give it in short, give it in diagram, that will be best. Then you can go for a conclusion, which is should be take 2-3 lines. You can give a statement of Prime Minister or famous quotation on terrorism. That will be the optimum answer for this. This is the structure of this particular answer. Go, let's see what is written. So terrorism is seeing an increase, 22% increase in deaths in 2023, 8,300 fatalities in 2023. It's the highest number in last 6-7 years. Global impact, escalation in conflict regions, growing threat of global peace and security. What are strengths and achievements of CTC? That means benefits of CTC. We have a, you can say, settled legal framework which has been adopted by 190 countries. Capacity building initiatives like the Peace Force of UN Security Council. Compliance monitoring systems are there, reviews over 50 countries. Information sharing is there, addressing emerging threats. Guidelines has been issued by UNSC. Partnership with other other organizations like FATF, publishing research function. These all are like some of the achievements of UNSC CTC. Limitations, lack of enforcement mechanism, especially when the countries that is involved is a major countries. There is absolutely difficult enforcing mechanism. You can also criticize the veto voting system, which limits countries' ability of the organization to reach a decision. So if any of the one country was vetoing the decision, then absolutely there is impasse in passing that. Political obstacles blocked by member states. China holds sanctions against Pakistan-based terrorists. Human rights concerns, definitional issues. Like there is no settled definition of terrorism. There is concept of good terrorism, bad terrorism, which is not appreciated by India, which has been demanding since 1998, a settled definition of terrorism, which still hasn't been implemented. Resource constraints, evolving terrorist tactics. Terrorists are like, we can see this pages in Lebanon, pagers attacked by Israel in Lebanon. So the terrorist attack or the security threats, security capacity is highly increasing. Insufficient grassroots level engagement, etc. and etc. What are different recommendations? You can think on different aspects like enforcement in institutional level. Like recently the Secretary of Foreign Affairs of Russia has made a statement that UNSC should have permanent membership from Australia, from Africa, from countries like India, Brazil, and so on and so forth on wake of this UNSC summit. So these all I can include in these particular options way forward. Conclusion, you can write about effectiveness. It has laid the foundation for global efforts, but it needs to expand to address the modern challenges. Next question, go through the question, then we'll have a quick discussion. Yeah. What is the question? Discuss the geopolitical and geostrategic importance of Maldives. Maldives so much in news. We have covered it in our current affairs booklets also. Maldives, due to this, you can say, diplomatic clashes with India, there has been a lot of articles. There was in news Maldives, and question has been taken from this. What is geopolitical and geostrategic significance of Maldives for India, with a focus on global trade, energy flows? So you can give 2 points on global trade, 2 points on energy flows, that will suffice. Further, also discuss how this relationship affects India's maritime security, regional stability amidst international competition. So intro, we are going to write something about India-Maldives relations. You can write about recent rift, body. First part will be focusing on discuss geopolitical and geostrategic importance. So geopolitical and geostrategic importance. Now in this also you can divide it into trade, you can divide it into energy, and you can use some other points also. Now third part is impacts on India's maritime security. You can divide impacts also into maritime security. You can divide it into regional stability. You can divide it into other aspects. Then you can go for a conclusion. So this will be the broad construct of this question. Here you can use the recent conflict that is happening in the introduction, geopolitical and geostrategic importance, 3 points on trade, 3 points on energy, 2 points on other, that will suffice. Impacts also, we are writing something about maritime security, we are going to write something about regional security, and we are going to write something about other impacts. Then we can go for conclusion. So this will be the overall structure for this answer. Let's see what has been written. For introduction, you can use China's growing influence in the region, India-Maldives relations, renewed strategic importance for India, 2023 diplomatic tensions, when President Muhammad Mursi's pro-China stance, need for a nuanced approach, maintaining India's strategic interest in Maldives. So these all can part form. You don't need to use all 4, you can use any of these for writing an introduction for this question. Now geostrategic and political importance of Maldives for India, strategic location, proximity to India, monitoring sea lanes, maritime route control. You can write about the trade happening in the region, energy flows, 80% of the energy flows. You might have studied the 80% of the energy flows of the world happens to the Malacca Strait. So you can write that here. Controls access between Gulf of Hormuz and Malacca Strait, it lies in between these. Energy security perspective, you can include counter external influence, economic integration, disaster management, cooperation. All these are different dimensions. Here also you can use our shared values, national interest, and the third aspect, that is strategic. You can use this formula and derive points for this also. Second part, impact on India's maritime security, balancing China's influence and stability. You can use the same approach for these, from marital awareness, naval presence, anti-privacy efforts, all these you can do. Conclusion, you can write about way forward based conclusion, you can write about some of the visions focus for India, what India should focus on or India's vision, and conclude the answer. So that's broadly the topic of discussion for international relations. I hope you have got a fair idea of whatever question you got, split it correctly. That is halfway done. If you know how to split the question correctly, then with the base knowledge you have, it is too easy to generate 2-3 points for each of the question. So, but if you are failed in bringing this differentiation, bringing the structural differentiation to these questions that is being asked, then it is going to, we are going to miss out very time. How much knowledge you gain, that is not going to be of help. So focus on these elements of splitting the questions correctly. On that note, we will keep an end to this international relations discussion. All the best.